Good afternoon, folks, and welcome back to another episode of Redeeming the Time. I'm your host, Chris Macy, and I'm the minister here with the North Valley Church of Christ. Today, we're going to be taking a look at, it's really the second lesson in this series on how to deal or how to cope with problems. It is a study that we've started here at North Valley for Wednesday nights. And we've already we did an introduction to that. We've looked at anxiety, and I'm going to go back and record these on video, but I want to just kind of keep moving forward. Today is Wednesday. What is today? It is April the 10th, Wednesday. So this evening here at North Valley, we're going to be taking a look at getting along with others. Now, the idea for this series came from Corey Roper with Truth for Today. He has articles that he has written up on this, and I've looked them over. We'll hit on some things he says in there, but no offense to Mr. Roper. He's a good man, smarter than I am, but I feel like those are a little too simple. I think he probably wrote that with the idea of everyone in the world just coming to his website and looking at it. So it's a low on the low end there, but it's still a good article, and I'll be hitting on some of the points he has there. But you know, when we think about this, getting along with others, it seems, especially for us here at North Valley, I think, and probably I believe for most people, it seems obvious, right? We want to get along with other people. In fact, I see this in my children the most. I have 4 kids. They always want to play games. Joshua is always talking about he wants his brother and his sisters to play with him, and they're over there. Jonah and Jody are there playing, doing things, and he's over there whining on the couch saying, they're not playing with me. They won't play with me, Dad. I look over and I say, well, why won't you play with them? Because they're playing. I want you to go play. Well, they don't want to play what I want to play, is what he says. So I try to impart and explain to him, Joshua, sometimes you have to play their game. You can't always expect people to play the way you want to play. You've got to have compromise. We take that same attitude and we keep it with us, don't we, as we become adults? Only we apply it to other things. I want people to get along with me, but no one wants to get along with me. It's everyone else's fault. And rarely do we take the blame. Or maybe better is it's difficult for us to take ourselves and put ourselves into their shoes. One of the signs of a great general in the military is a general who can see his enemy's mind on the battlefield. General Patton was a genius at that. He knew exactly what his enemies were going to do, sometimes before the enemy even knew what it was going to do. He already knew what they were going to do and how they would respond. He had this uncanny ability to be able to look out into the battlefield and see what he wants to do, and also take himself out of his own shoes and see that same battlefield from the perspective of his enemy. If you can do that, you're going to win the war. That is a sign of a great general. And generals who can only see things from their perspective, those are the worst generals. You have to be able to see things from the other person's perspective. On the flip side, for the Christian, for us today, for you and me, we want to get along with everybody, right? So we have to be able to see things from other people's points of view. We have to be able to look out there and not just look at it from our perspective, but from their perspective as well. Well, why are we having this conflict? Why are we having a hard time in our relationship? What is it that I'm doing wrong? Married couples who struggle and are striving to do better should be able to see and do this as well. Well, why is my wife so angry with me? What have I done? I don't think I did anything wrong, but maybe she or he, if you're for the wife, maybe they heard me say something or saw me do something where I intended, my motivation was this, but they saw it from a different perspective. Or maybe I didn't see something from their perspective and I offended them. That's what we ought to do. That's what we need to be doing. And so that's what I want us to think about and look at. And I want to start, I kind of jumped the gun there a little bit, but I want to start by reading Genesis chapter 4, verses 1 through 8. This is the account of Cain and Abel. at the beginning. You'll know the story, but I want to read it for you. Genesis chapter 4, starting in verse 1. Now the man had relations with his wife Eve, and she conceived and gave birth to Cain. And she said, I have gotten a man-child with the help of the Lord. Again she gave birth to his brother Abel, and Abel was a keeper of flocks, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. So it came about in the course of time that Cain brought an offering to the Lord of the fruit of the ground. Abel, on his part, also brought of the firstlings of his flock and of their fat portions, and the Lord had regard for Abel and for his offering. But for Cain and for his offering he had no regard. So Cain became very angry, and his countenance fell. Then the Lord said to Cain, Why are you angry? And why has your countenance fallen? If you do well, will not your countenance be lifted up? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door, and its desire is for you, but you must master it. Cain told Abel his brother, and it came about when they were in the field that Cain rose up against Abel his brother, and killed him. Now that's pretty extreme. But let's examine what's going on here in this passage. We see in the passage where Adam and Eve, they had two children. The oldest is Cain and also Abel. And it comes about in the course of time where they're giving offering to the Lord. We're not told how they learned to do this or why, but we know that they know to do it. They need to give an offering. And we're given a picture of Cain's offering and a picture of Abel's offering. Cain's offering, it sounds like to me, especially based on what we see with Abel. In fact, well, since Cain was given first and then Abel, let's go backwards. Let's look at Abel's first. I think this will help us see what's going on with Cain. It says that with Abel's offering, on his part there in verse 4, he brought of the firstlings of his flock and of their fat portions. So it gives us three things of what he did. First, he brings an offering. It's the firstlings, which is the first of those that are born, or of his flock, the first young one. And it's of the fat portion. That doesn't mean that, that one's overweight. He's talking about this is the good one. This is the plump one. This is the best one. The best, and not only the best, it's the first best. Have you ever built something or made something and you're like, well, I made it. I want to be the first one to try it. Yeah, my kids are like that with their toys. Once you put the toy together, I'm the first one. It's my toy. See, we kind of have that attitude. And Abel looks out at all he has and says, you know what? I'm giving the Lord the first of the best of what I have. That's my offering. For Cain, as he's given first, of his in verse 3, it says that Cain brought an offering to the Lord of the fruit of the ground. Was it the first fruit? Was it the best fruit? What was it? Just the fruit of the ground? It almost sounds like he thought, oh, hey, I'm supposed to do an offering. Grab that, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. We'll put that in there. And there was nothing wrong with him giving fruit. It's his attitude. It wasn't the best of the best. It wasn't the first. It was just whatever. And they bring it there, and God had regard for Abel's. He did not have regard for Cain's. That made Cain angry. At who? Well, at Abel. Abel got recognition. Abel got praise. He didn't. And he didn't like that. And conflict began to grow right there and then. And so the Lord came and tried to help him. Hey, why is your countenance? Why is it fallen? Why are you upset? Why are you angry? Sin is crouching at the door. You need to master it. In other words, when you say master it, see, sin's desire was for him. Sin wanted to master Cain. God's telling Cain, you need to master sin. We used this last week in our lesson on anxiety. Anxiety is always there. There is no cure for anxiety. But it's always going to be there. So you need to learn how to master anxiety. how to be the one who really controls it. You tell what anxiety is going to do. It's always going to be there. Or are you going to let anxiety control you? Sin is always going to be there. Its desire is to master you and take charge of your life. But we need to master sin. We need to tell it, no, I'm not going to do that. So the conflict has ensued between Cain and Abel. Is Cain wanting to get along with Abel? It seems like he wants to get along with sin in his anger. It seems like his emotions is what's got control of him here. And so he lashes out. And sin has master over him, and he kills his brother. When we have trouble getting along with others, we need to try to discover the reason for the conflict. And that can be hard. Sometimes we give in to our emotions, and we just let that anger stew and build up inside of us, and we don't ever really stop to consider what's going on here. Did I do something? Did they do something? Was there a perspective? Try to putting ourselves into their shoes. Have you ever got angry at somebody on the road because they cut you off, or they're not driving fast enough, or whatever it might be? You don't know what's going on in their lives. You don't know. I only bring that up because I'm an angry driver. I'll admit it. I want to get from point A to point B. I don't want to be on the road with anybody else. I just want to go. And so if the traffic is not flowing fast enough, if they're not speeding fast enough on the ramp to get onto the highway, they're just kind of moseying along, or they cut me off, I get frustrated and angry. Well, maybe they're not, maybe they've managed their time better than I have, right? And so they're not in a hurry. Or maybe something else is going on. I don't know. But they are a human being, and it's easy to get angry with somebody when there's distance and you don't really know them. We all want to get along with people, but when we don't, we need to discover what are the reasons for the conflict. Maybe that we're innocent in the matter and they're at fault, but honestly, most of the time, if not all the time, most of the time, it's going to be a combination of both parties doing something wrong there. But we need to figure out what those things are. And the best thing to do is always prevention. And there's a couple of things we can look at, key importances about prevention. Number one, we need to always cultivate the characteristics of Christ. Having those characteristics are the greatest prevention of allowing conflict to come into our relationships with other people. The first three fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace. We want those things. Anxiety will rob us of those things. Conflict will rid us of those things. We want love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness. Patience. We need to have patience toward one another. Long suffering. Maybe you've read that in the older, like King James. I think New King James uses long suffering also. I like that term. It means patience. Patience is a better word, but long suffering means you're suffering in some way, whether it's a mental, physical, whatever it might be. You're suffering, and yet you're not going to react negatively toward that. So you're going to suffer a while for this person's sake. You're long suffering. You're patient with them in order to discover what is the real problem here. How can we solve this so that we can bring peace back between you and me? Or at least continued, I should say, to have peace between you and me. We need to cultivate these characteristics of Christ. Jesus brings that up multiple times there in the Galatians, the fruit of the Spirit. Paul lets us know. Jesus brings it up in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 7. And other places as well. We need to spend our lives doing good. We need to walk in the footsteps of Christ, live at peace with all men in the best of our abilities. Romans 12:18. Number two, we should choose our companions carefully. In order to avoid experiencing conflicts with let's say, for example, a spouse. The most important step a person can take is to marry someone who they get along with, right? Marry somebody who is a Christian, who has the same ideas that you have about salvation and life as a whole. If you don't, there's going to be conflict. You're going to have problems and you're going to have issues. I've seen this in other folks. I have a friend who's he's not a member of the church. He's a Protestant. He married a Catholic, and at first everything was great and fine. And she didn't practice much. He didn't practice much. Then they had kids. Stress, conflict ensued. We need to choose our companions carefully. And not only with our spouses, even with our friends. Bad company corrupts good morals, right? We should avoid irritating behavior. Now, this is on our part. Now, is there anything wrong with some of my behavior? I don't think so. Other people might think so. I know that there are some things that I do that irritate people. Or maybe there's some words that I use that some people don't like. So, you know what I do? Especially when I'm preaching, I avoid those behaviors. I avoid those words. Because my goal, while I'm up there preaching, is to impart the mind and heart of God into the mind and heart of those who are listening. I am simply a steward of the things of God. And so I want to get it in there. And I want to remove any and all roadblocks that would hinder me from getting this word into there. And so I'm looking for every opportunity, every possibility. One of the things is this video series. I am not big on recording myself. I don't like the audio. I've been kind of fighting with my elders about recording everything and posting everything, but I'm posting some of those things now. I don't enjoy it, but I know it's useful for folks. The video, I'm only doing this because I believe it is good for a lot of folks out there to watch. It's easier for them to see, have a video, and watch in this way. So I'm hopeful that this will be helpful to them. When you avoid irritating behavior. In fact, let me open my Bible to Proverbs 27. I forgot to check this out to verify it. So hopefully it's Proverbs 27. Verse 14. Just going to read it and see what it says. This is on the idea of why we should avoid irritating behavior. This proverb says, "He who blesses his friend with a loud voice early in the morning, it will be reckoned a curse to him." Oh, man. Some people are not morning people, right? I'm a morning person. My wife is not a morning person. Do you know what I do for her in the mornings? I let her be. I don't bother her. I wait till she wakes up. Imagine if you had a friend. You're in bed asleep, and your friend comes along, and they go, "Good morning," right outside your window, or banging on your door. Not good, right? Everyone, even Solomon, the wisest person on earth, said, bad idea. Avoid irritating behaviors. We know what those might be. Sometimes friends will help us if they're good friends, and they'll let us know what those irritating behaviors are. Take it with a grain of salt, listen to their words, and consider what they're saying. Take that into account. Number 4, we must guard our tongues. Well, that's obvious, right? You know that song, "Angry Words, May They Never." That's a hymn song. I didn't pull it out, but in there's a line that says, "Brightest links of life are broken by a single angry word." The brightest links. Brightest link meaning, there's a lot of joy and a great relationship. But one angry word can destroy that relationship. This is one of the preventive ways to prevent conflict. But conflict's going to come. And when they do, what are we going to do? What are we going to do about that? We should begin, number 1, by analyzing the nature of the conflict, taking a look at it. If we disagree with someone on a matter of faith, well, if it's a doctrinal issue, maybe we need to stand our ground. If it's a non-doctrinal issue, for myself, I have differing opinions with other preachers out there concerning the definition and the meaning of the term Holy Spirit in several passages in the Bible. I do believe there is a third person of the Godhead, the Holy Spirit, But I do not believe every single passage that has a capital S for Spirit is talking about the third person of the Godhead. In fact, I don't think most of them are, but some people disagree with me. That is not a matter of salvation. And so if someone's having a discussion with me about it and I can tell that they're getting irritated, you know what? I start backing off. I'll start telling them, well, your way has a lot of credence. There's some possibilities there, and that very well could be. And I will give it consideration. And I always do, but I avoid the conflict. I'm not going to let it tear apart the church or relationships or anything like that. I'll just let it be. So we need to analyze and think about this. However, most conflicts are not the result of disputes over what's right or wrong. Usually they come from one of three sources. Here they are. Number one, unresolved wounds inflicted by one person or another. I always think of the Hatfields and the McCoys on that. Number two, disagreements about questions involving opinions rather than truth. That's a big one in the church. And number three, personal conflicts. What can be done about these is dependent upon the conflict itself. When conflicts are the consequences of disagreements, we first need to try to reach an agreement, I think. We need, Christians as a whole, we're inclined to give in to one another when we disagree. And so for Christ's disciples, compromise should be possible in most situations. I remember once when Guy Orbison Jr. up in Durango was trying to reconcile the church. You had the Church of Christ and you had the Christian church. Or not the Christian church, I'm sorry. Well, there is that one, but in this case, it was the Church of Christ and another Church of Christ, but they were, sometimes they're called the antis. I don't think they like that term, though. They don't believe in having a paid preacher. They don't believe in having bathrooms or kitchens in the building. They're not all to that extreme. Some of them are a little wavering on some of those issues. But anyway, this particular one, no water fountains, no bathrooms, no kitchens in the worship assembly, no paid preachers, and no Bible classes, only a worship service. And they were having studies together, and Guy was telling them, okay, look, we will get rid of the kitchen, we will get rid of the bathrooms, we'll get rid of the water fountains. I will not get paid by the church anymore. I will just preach, on and on and on. He was giving in on all those issues because they weren't salvation issues. All he wanted to do was to bring them back into one church, one place of worship, not to be divided. He gave in on everything, all of those things. They rejected it. Why? Well, I'm sure they had reasons, but they were probably selfish reasons. But we have to be willing to compromise on those things that we are able to compromise, especially when it comes to unity. Sometimes compromise may not be possible because strongly held views of the individual or groups that's involved. What can be done then? Well, when that happens, we may need to agree to go our separate ways. Not in that particular case with Guy Orbison, though. That's because we should have been striving for unity there. But there are cases where there might be some disagreements, and maybe we need to go separate ways. I'm always mindful of the second missionary journey of Paul and Barnabas. Well, not really of Paul and Barnabas, but they were going to have one. And then starting in verse 36 of Acts 15, is that right? Yeah. Says, after some days, Paul said to Barnabas, let us return and visit the brethren in every city in which we proclaimed the word of the Lord, and see how they are. Barnabas wanted to take John, called Mark, along with them also. But Paul kept insisting that they should not take him along, who had deserted them in Pamphylia, and had not gone with them to the work. And there occurred such a sharp disagreement that they separated from one another, and Barnabas took Mark with him and sailed away to Cyprus. But Paul chose Silas and left, being committed by the brethren to the grace of the Lord. And he was traveling through Syria and Cilicia, strengthening the churches. Sharp disagreement. What was going on here was, in the first missionary journey, John Mark went with them, but after the first or second stop, he left and went home. And that's not very good. When you got a few guys and you need help, and that help leaves and abandons you at the very beginning of the work, Not good. That did not make Paul happy. That wouldn't make me happy. If I was going on the next journey, I wouldn't want to take that guy either. He proved to be unuseful. He wasn't mature enough to keep on keeping on. Barnabas, the encourager, decided to give him another chance. Let's take him. And Paul said, no way, Jose. And so, such a sharp disagreement, Barnabas took Mark. They went their way. Paul went with Silas, and he went his way. But they did not let that grudge hold them back from working together or continuing the work of the Lord. Paul didn't write bad scathing letters about Mark or Barnabas, nor did Barnabas do the same about Paul or Mark do that. In fact, later on we see Paul and Mark getting along just fine, right? No grudges. In fact, Paul found him useful in many other ways. That is a good thing. Yeah, they had a disagreement, but they didn't let that disagreement destroy their relationship or the work of the Lord. The work continued to happen. That is a great attitude. That's the attitude of Christ there. Even in those difficult things, they were still able to keep the work going and worked in other ways in the future. Sometimes good Christians discover that they have different ideas about how to do church work, right? But we disagree about maybe how to implement it, or somebody wants to do something different. What do? Well, maybe there can be a compromise. If compromise doesn't seem to be happening, well, okay, let that person do this work, and we'll do this work over here, if that's possible. As long as there's no disunity or disruption in the church. When conflicts, though, are the result of personality differences, well, that gets different, right? And sometimes we might think, well, we have a conflict here because of a disagreement on how to get things done. But sometimes that disagreement really is a spawn of a personality disagreement. We don't like a particular person because of their personality. And these things just show about or come about based on how we feel about another person rather than what we think about their policy or their idea or their thoughts. The fact is, we like some people more than we like other people. There's going to be some personalities out there that might rub you the wrong way. Since I've been a preacher, I have discovered that there's a lot of personalities out there that I'm not too keen on. And I had to learn to temper myself on that. When they're with me and they're doing their weird quirks that irks me, let it go. Let it go and listen and smile and nod my head and let them know they're my brother and sister and that I love them. It's hard. I don't know why. It's just the way we're built or wired in our brains, but we have those dislikes. How do we solve such problems? We can examine ourselves to ask whether our aversions are logical or necessary or scriptural. Does the Bible say it's wrong for a person to be brash, ignorant, or rich, or whatever their personality difference might be? We should determine whether or not our impressions of those we dislike is accurate. Maybe we misinterpreted this person's actions or words. That's taking ourselves out of our shoes, putting ourselves in their shoes. We talked about that in the beginning. If our opinions are accurate, we need to ask why that person behaves a certain way. Likely, if we were in the same situation, we would be no different maybe. Again, putting ourselves in their shoes. Or maybe we just need to get over our disdain for such people. Get over it and deal with it. We ought to look for the good in people we dislike. It's hard to continue to dislike people if we really understand what it is they're going through. It's even more difficult. And here's a great one. In every single one of these possibilities, here's one way to overcome disliking somebody. Start praying for that person on a daily basis. If you do that every day, I bet you after 1 week, when you're around them, you will not dislike them because you will have them on your mind all the time. And you'll be praying for them in a positive way. And when you do that, it strengthens the relationship. That's why husbands, wives, children need to pray for one another. It will strengthen the family. It's hard to dislike somebody when they're constantly in your prayers to the Lord. Okay, you probably noticed a little shift there in the video. It's not necessarily me editing it, although I am. My camera was set up to end recording at 30 minutes for some reason. I didn't know it, and I was just getting ready to end the lesson. So it's right at 30 minutes. I was going to say that, so I'm going to do that here now. So I just finished talking about prayer. And in Coy Roper's notes, he ended out with this about a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. One of the most influential books of the 20th century. And in this book, he much of what he had to say is helpful. It's scriptural too, not all of it, but for example, he suggests that to win friends and influence people, one should express sincere appreciation. Now, the purpose of this book, though, is to help its readers to get along with others so that they can help get along in their lives or in their career, really. And what happens, and here's the problem, the difference between that book and the Christian idea of getting along with people. In that book, the goal is to help yourself in your career. And if you're getting along with someone that you don't like just to get up in your career, what happens when you finally get what you want from that person? What happens in that relationship? You drop it. Yeah, maybe sometimes you actually find that you really like the person, things go along great, but not always. I know when I was in the workforce and in the real world, that happened to me a lot. I saw myself getting used by people. When I was in the military, I would get used by people, and it irked me more than anything. That is not the Christian motive. God has not called us to be enthusiastic, outgoing individuals with a salesperson type attitude. He calls us to be Christians who follow in the footsteps of our Master. Even when he was being spit upon and cursed and people were crucifying him, he could have ended it like that. But out of love, he died for us at the right time. While we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. That's the attitude we need to have. We need to learn how to cope with our problems and to get along with people like Christ. We need to make the most of every opportunity, redeem the time. And I hope you can do that. Pray for me if you would for this lesson as I presented this evening to the North Valley. I hope it goes well, and I hope it was helpful for you this evening or whenever you may be watching it. Thank you very much.